What's good, word? How we doing today? What's good, word? How we doing today? I'm back with another reactions video. You already know the word. First time here, like, comment, subscribe, and also comment your recommendation in the comment section. Today I'm gonna be doing what it will be like escaping a Nazi death camp. I know it's something none of us could imagine, and a very hard time in our history. But I'm gonna do this video because this did happen, so we're gonna know what really took place. You already know what I do. I'm gonna jump into it.
A time of terror that brought out the worst in many. Yet even in the darkest, most desperate times, people joined together to fight against the wicked in positions of authority, even when the consequence they would face was often certain death. Rudolf Verba and Alfred Wetzler are two such men who fought for what was right, even when all of the odds were stacked against them. They wanted to save others from execution, but first, they'd have to escape from the Nazis' camp they were imprisoned in. They knew that if they were caught, they'd be executed because they were trying to escape from a Nazi death camp. Today, you can say the word Auschwitz and pretty much everyone will know exactly what you're talking about. The concentration camp in Europe, the biggest of those used by Hitler and the Nazis during World War II. A sight of unspeakable horror. The unsuspecting Jewish population from surrounding areas was systematically brought to Auschwitz in the cattle cars of trains. Here in the death camp, they were murdered in gas chambers by the thousands upon thousands. As the Nazis expanded their territory over the war, so too did the concentration camp's operation to accommodate the further influx of victims. It's estimated that in 1944, up to 12,000 Jewish people were killed at Auschwitz every day. These were men, women, and children, husbands and wives and sons and daughters, all surrounded by barbed wire and
This ain't new to me, but it's literally like a refresh in my memory because I've been
Nazi guards and killed mercilessly and without hesitation. Those who made a run for it but failed were publicly executed. Many people entered Auschwitz. Few would leave alive. What's hard to grasp now is that even as late as 1944, many of the details of what went on in the concentration camps weren't well or widely known by the outside world. In fact, massacres carried out in concentration camps were kept secret from almost everyone except those who directly participated in them. Much of the world had no idea just how evil Hitler's final solution was. As Jewish prisoners, though, Verba and Wetzler knew exactly what was happening. They had watched as innocent Czechs were brutally and systematically slaughtered right in front of them. Then came the rumors that the Nazis wanted to start exterminating Jewish Hungarians. Verba and Wetzler vowed to prevent this. They believed that it was their duty to spread the word of the mass killing and to stop the Nazis' genocidal plans. They wanted to warn people, the people boarding the trains to Auschwitz, who often had no idea what awaited them inside the barbed wire fencing. But how would they be able to escape and tell the world what they knew? They searched the camp for a point of weakness and explored plan after plan. Unfortunately, none of them seemed even remotely likely to succeed. Until one day Wetzler told Verba of a possible way to escape based off the ideas of 4 other prisoners. Those 4 intended to hide inside a hollowed-out place in a pile of wood in an area where construction was being done on the camp, where they would wait out the 3 days that guards would be searching for them. Then, once the coast was clear, the prisoners would run toward the south and over the Slovakian border. The 4 prisoners put their plan into action. It went seamlessly and they fled Auschwitz into the country. However, they were caught in a village to the south. Still, it proved that hiding in the wood worked. Wetzler and Verba bided their time, waiting to see if the men who were captured would reveal their exit strategy and set them back to square one. In time, it became obvious that they hadn't. The stack of wood remained untouched and unnoticed. So 2 weeks later, Wetzler and Verba made their own attempt. Once inside the stack of wood, Verba scratched off a message left by the men who had used it in the escape before. The note they had etched into the wood of "kiss your you-know-what" would certainly get them executed. The scratching also helped serve as a minor distraction while waiting out the 3 days. Roll call took place at 5:30, at which time they expected to be missed and to have the guards come looking for them. They waited in the darkness, concealed completely. Then 5:30 came, and no siren went off signaling that anyone was missing. 5:45 passed, and then time ticked on further to 6. The 2 men began to fearfully consider what this could mean for them. They wondered if their location had been given up and those in charge knew exactly where they were hiding. Nervously, they waited longer as the silence continued. Then finally, much later than they had expected, the siren ripped through the night. They heard the sounds of men running and of dogs scampering on the wood piled on top of them. It was a while before it was silent again. They stayed in the wood for a full 3 days and nights without eating or drinking, growing sore from never moving. Finally, the third day was done and they heard the guards giving up on their search. Now was their chance, and they eagerly pushed on the wood. It refused to move. They frantically pushed some more and shoved on it as hard as they could. As they grew frantic, it finally gave way, and they lifted it up off them. They were free in the night, but this was only the very beginning. Over 80 miles of enemy-held territory lay before them before they could make it to their final destination. They took off and promptly got lost in a hostile area. Their plan was to cross the Beskid Mountains to the south of the camp. They ran into a village instead. Day was almost breaking before they could find their way out again, and as it grew light, they found themselves in another small inhabited area. They were out in the open without any shelter, so they were forced to turn to someone living there for help. They knocked on a door and a Polish peasant came who knew exactly who they were and what they wanted. She fed them and gave them advice on how to find the mountains they were searching for. One of her sons was in a concentration camp, and she gave the men what little money she had to spare, which amounted to only about a single British pound. She also wished them luck, which she knew they'd need more than anything. They soon found themselves walking close to Promka, a village filled with soldiers and where the men who escaped before them had been caught. Shots suddenly rang out and bullets hit all around them. They realized that they too had been spotted. The Nazis gave chase and pursued them, their dogs howling alongside them. Wetzler and Verba ran for their lives along the mountainside until they ran into a stream. Despite its freezing temperatures, they jumped into the water, hoping it would conceal their smell. In time, as the two prisoners hid in their terror in a ditch, the sounds of the search grew fainter and eventually stopped. It had been a very close call, but they had to continue on. Soon, they came face to face with another peasant. All could be lost in a minute if she chose to turn them in to the Nazis instead of helping them. They had no choice but to trust her though, as they needed directions. With their fate in her hands, she left them and promised a man would return to help them later that night. As she walked away, they waited uneasily. They had no way of knowing her true intentions. They hoped they hadn't just made a big mistake that would cost them everything. Finally, under the cover of darkness, a man appeared. He was carrying a gun and was accompanied by the same woman. The two prisoners eyed his weapon uneasily. Then the woman presented Wetzler and Verba with food and they unabashedly dug in, having hardly eaten since they left camp. They were confused when the man started laughing. He explained that judging by the way they ate, he was convinced they really were prisoners who escaped the camp and not undercover Nazis trying to test their loyalty. Wetzler and Verba followed the couple home that night. Verba had to cut his boots off as his feet had become so incredibly swollen. The man who had taken them in offered him slippers and then led the duo, including the slipper-clad Verba, right to the edge of the Slovakian border. They thanked the man for all he had done to help them, and he wished them luck.
You know, a lot of these adventures that happen through history, like stuff like this, only happen because of like people like that let it go. And then there's a lot of people that don't make it because people that don't let it go.
And said he hoped the slippers would last for the rest of their journey. They waited until a German patrol passed before they made a run for safety. It was 2 weeks after their escape from Auschwitz before they made it to Slovakian territory. Here, a third peasant put them in contact with a well-known doctor who listened to their story and agreed to take them to the Jewish leadership of another town whom he believed would handle the matter in the best way possible. He couldn't have been more incorrect. Verba and Wetzler, who had braved 80 miles of treacherous terrain and undoubtedly risked their lives, soon found out that the message they so badly wanted to share would not be heard after all. Both men told the Jewish Council of the atrocities being committed at Auschwitz. Their goal was for the official documentation of their story that had become known as the Verba-Wetzler Report to be given to those in positions of power. In the hands of the right people, they believed the deportation and executions would be stopped. So it was sent to the Allies. Copies were given to the British, the Americans, and even the Pope. Change, however, did not come. This was for many reasons. Some copies of the report didn't make it to their intended destinations for months. There was also the problem that the head of the Hungarian Jewish underground actually failed to share the report with the right people, as he was in the process of making an agreement with the Nazis, and he believed its contents would destroy his chances. His train to freedom did end up saving 1,600 people, however, without the contents of the report being
This man gave up 12,000 people a day to save 1,600 people.
known, it also resulted in the deaths of what is suspected to be multiple hundreds of thousands. Verba and Wetzler had escaped in April of 1944. As time passed, they waited in frustration and disbelief as the weeks and months passed, and still nothing was done. It was not until June when British intelligence finally got a hold of their report. That same month, the BBC aired its contents, and days later, it made headlines in the New York Times. The world was in shock. Allied forces threatened action against those deporting Jewish Hungarians, and the Pope gave his condemnation. However, the admiral in charge of Hungary allowed deportations to continue nonetheless, having no intention of going against Hitler's wishes. It was just a coincidence that the US Air Force attacked Hungary in July, as it was not intended to specifically send the admiral a message. He took it that way though, and the trains to Auschwitz finally came to a stop. It's estimated that 300,000 Hungarian Jews had been gassed to death by this point, and just 20,000 were rescued. This was many, many more than were saved by the Freedom Train Agreement that delayed the message that Wetzler and Verba risked their lives to deliver. Together, Wetzler and Verba are credited with saving more Jews at one time than any other person during the war. However, they had to accept the haunting fact that due to the interference of others, thousands more who could have been saved were not. The total death toll was staggering, with estimates being that as many as 1.5 million people died at Auschwitz. Wetzler and Verba are heroes, but they couldn't have done what they did alone. It took the 4 men who had escaped before them and the 3 peasants who helped guide, shelter, and feed them for their ultimate success. Not to mention the British intelligence who helped finally spread.
That's what I said. This story would have never been this story if they decided to
Spread the message to the rest of the world. War is cruel, and many people do cruel things.
It's crazy because the 4 people that escaped out of that wood probably never made it to see another day, but it did lead to them making it out in order to save everybody else. It's crazy what people had to go to in these times, and you know, with war coming around the corner and Ukraine and Russia and all these crazy things going on right now, you just never know. Love your people that are close to you. Appreciate everybody tuning in, and check y'all out.